If there's ever been a Chad so Chadly that he can claim his lineage is one of the gods, have an entire month named after him dedicated to his complete and utter Chatly aura, and be captured by pirates, only to be ransomed and come back with a fleet and crucify said pirates afterwards. His name would be Julius Caesar. Historians debate whether it was July 12th or July 13th in 100 BC, but it's one day, so who really cares? Apparently, if the date is correct however, that means Caesar held each of his offices 2 years before the legal minimum age. But hey, you're the ruling noble class, so everyone else lower on the totem pole can suck it. Born of the Julii clan, Caesar was born a patrician, one of the original members of Rome's aristocracy, and had amassed in the 4th century BC with a bunch of plebeian families that formed the governing nobility class in Rome since then. Choosing a political career from the beginning, Caesar wanted to transform the mismanaged government of Rome for the better, or rather, suited to his ideals. He soon found himself married to a fine babe named Cornelia in 84 BC. The only problem was, she was a daughter to a noble who assisted in a revolution initiated over some bill that a bunch of people didn't like, which got him kicked out, but then he got pissed off and came back and took Rome. But then he was killed in a mutiny. Well, back to Cornelia. She's that guy's daughter. So now you could see why the other houses/clans thought he was a bit sus. Well anyway, this guy, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who has 2/3 the same names as the last guy, returned to Italy and led a counter-revolution against the rebels. Well, after kicking their behinds, Sulla found out that Caesar was hitched to Cornelia, and he wasn't having any of it. So he ordered him to divorce her, to which Caesar refused, and was basically threatened into leaving Italy to go on military campaigns. In 78 BC, Caesar returned to Rome after Sulla died to start his job as a politician. So I guess in a way, to gain favor, he began kissing the guy that just died's ass by prosecuting any counter-revolutionaries, or the guys that Sulla was beefing with. Anyhoosers, after that he went to Rhodes to study oratory, because I guess he sucked at talking to people. But he was soon intercepted and held for ransom by pirates, to which a young, egotistical politician in the making rubbed him the wrong way a little bit. So after paying his ransom, he raised a fleet, captured said filthy pirates, and then proceeded to crucify all of them. Bear in mind, he did all of this while not technically holding a public office. So yeah, there's that. And if that wasn't Chad enough, in 74 BC, Mithridates, the 6th king of Pontus, decided to go to war with Rome. Because he was feeling froggy that day, Caesar raised his own private army to fight him. So after that, he returned to Rome. He was granted one of the elective military tribuneships. Unfortunately, in 68 or 69 BC, his wife and his aunt died. But hey, at least he was elected quaestor. So being the slimy bastard he is, he used his wife and aunt's funerals to improve his political career by praising 2 dead guys that didn't have anything to do with the funerals. So later, Caesar married Pompeia, who is the female version of Pompey. Just kidding, she's a distant relative. And Pompey is some other important guy, but he's not Chad enough to get his own video. So after doing his job for a while, he got elected one of the curule aediles, which is a fancy word for magistrate. And if you don't know what that means, I'm not Googling it for you. Then he got elected Pontifex Maximus in 63 BC, which, come on man, that just sounds Chad-like. So after all that, Caesar's starting to get a big head for himself, and he's seen as a controversial guy, especially after being accused of being complicit, even though he helped suppress another rebellion called Catiline's Conspiracy. In 62 BC, Caesar was elected praetor, aka the guy you really don't want to piss off. Then he became the governator of the far reaches of Spain from 61 to 60 BC. Then he went on a military expedition in the northwest frontier of the empire, which basically made him really rich and put him in a position of consulship, which is the highest elected public office of the Roman Republic. Alright, so skip forward a little bit. So Caesar is now one of the consuls, and now him and Pompey have a secret pact going on, and his plan was to get Crassus to join in, which would be particularly useful because Crassus was Mr. Moneybags of the era. He was basically the ultimate sugar daddy of the Romans. But this partnership was called the First Triumvirate. The only problem is, Pompey and Crassus fucking hate each other. But Caesar went to oratory school and put that silver tongue to good use. And no, not like that. So he helped those two get on good terms, then Pompey married Caesar's daughter to seal the deal on their alliance. And if you're like me, you just imagine a disgusting old man with some young attractive woman. Anyway, Caesar then married some chick named Calpurnia, who was the daughter of some other important guy, who became a consul in 58 BC. So Caesar, now a consul, introduced a bill to basically give public Roman lands in Italy to be given to Pompey's soldiers, and the bill was vetoed by like 3 tribunes. So then Caesar hired some of Pompey's men to cause a giant riot, and then proceeded to take the lands anyway, and then, like the total Chad he was, put it into law by one of his agents who likely bribed or threatened somebody to either shut up or look the other way. I don't know. Alright, so now, after negotiations, Caesar has control of Gaul and Illyricum. Now Caesar plans to use the Transalpine Gaul as his personal playground and recruiting ground, and also plans to kick barbarians' asses beyond Rome's northwest frontier. Between 58 and 50 BC, Caesar took the rest of Gaul up to the Rhine, and was so effective at keeping the barbarians in line, they all behaved throughout the Roman civil wars lasting between 49 BC and 31 BC. We're getting ahead of ourselves though, so let's rewind a little bit back to 58 BC, when Caesar went beyond Rome's northwestern frontier to fight off the Helvetii, a Celtic tribe. In 57 BC, he then proceeded to kill a bunch of Gaelic people to the north around modern-day Normandy and Brittany. In 56 BC, the Veneti, who were one of Rome's conquered tribes, began to revolt, assisted by the Morini. Caesar proceeded to kick their asses as well, and the next 3 years he proceeded to kill several Germanic peoples, raid Britain again, and then put down a rebellion in northwest Gaul, and put down more revolts after that. Now enters someone to contest Caesar's chadliness. In 52 BC, the many Gaelic tribes found a leader that they can all get behind, the Arvernian Vercingetorix. So knowing he can't beat the Romans in a regular battle or siege, he wanted to cut off their supplies, because a hungry Roman is a weak, killable Roman. So he wanted to do a scorched earth kind of policy, but his countrymen weren't exactly keen on destroying and burning the lands they lived in. So that didn't happen according to plan. So initially, Caesar was beaten at Gergovia, at the Battle of Gergovia. Who would have guessed that's what it was called? Alright, so now we are at our climax in the Gallic Wars with the Siege of Alesia, which was a fortified settlement in modern-day France. It was also the last major battle between the two. So Caesar, being the Chadly genius he was, built a wall around the besieged Gauls to keep them in, and then built a wall outside of their own forces to keep Gaelic reinforcements out. Genius. So after giving it to the Gaelic tribes from around 52 to 49 BC, Pompey and Caesar started to distrust one another, and the other consul Marcellus didn't like Caesar, and the Senate wanted Pompey to force Caesar to go back to Gaul without honor or a second consulship. So with everybody afraid of a civil war breaking out, both sides started building up forces, with Pompey prepared to defend Rome from Caesar as a last resort if his army marched into Italy. Well, after both sides tried working things out, and to agree to disarm, the Senate declared Caesar to be a complete and utter Chad and a threat to their power. So around 49 BC, after being declared an enemy of the empire, Caesar performed the ultimate FU by crossing the Rubicon. So being the anti-Chads that they were, Pompey and many senators retreated south. Caesar continued south, wanting to capture Pompey and force negotiations. But Pompey, being the brave warrior he was, escaped to Greece. So Caesar kind of just hung around Rome for a couple weeks, then took the treasury, put his buddy Lepidus in charge, while he went to go take back Pompey's Spanish provinces, and then kicked the piss out of 2 of his legates at the Battle of Ilerda. He then went to Dyrrhachium to besiege Pompey, but Pompey's forces were able to repel Caesar. Then Pompey does what Pompey does best and ran away further south into Greece. Caesar followed him, determined to shove his foot up Pompey's bunghole, eventually finding him and beating his army at Pharsalus. Pompey fled yet again to Egypt, basically begging Caesar for a pardon. but was then killed when he got to Alexandria. So Caesar, after following Pompey to Alexandria, with nothing else better to do, decides to stir the shit pot and start an Egyptian civil war between the child pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, Theos Philopator, and Cleopatra, his sister. Well, while they're in the capital of Egypt, Caesar, of course, doing what all Chads do, banged Ptolemy's sister, which pissed him off, but failed to besiege Alexandria. He then decided to bully Ptolemy at the Battle of the Nile and installed his sister Cleopatra as a ruler. So condoms not being a thing back then, Cleopatra ended up giving birth to Caesar's child named Caesarion. Caesar then apparently went to Antioch and had to put some Pontic dude in his place at the Battle of Zela, leading him to coin the famous term Veni Vidi Vici. Then he went back to Italy. Alright, so since Caesar's been gone, this dude Mark Antony was basically in charge. But he wasn't a Chad, and nobody liked him. So Caesar demoted Antony, and there had apparently been some riots in southern Italy, and Mark may or may not have killed a lot of people to suppress it, and a lot of people weren't exactly happy about it. So yeah, demoted. Then Caesar, being the Chad he was, put down those same riots without violence. So after some BS about elections being held or not, Caesar's in Africa. He just is. And got his ass kicked by Titus Labienus, a former lieutenant of Caesar, during the Gallic Wars. Well, then Caesar somehow managed to kick their asses, and then Labienus ran away to the Spanish provinces that were revolting at the time. Alright, so Caesar executed Vercingetorix after returning to Italy, but had to quickly return to Spain to put down more revolts. After a Pyrrhic victory at the Battle of Munda, Caesar massacred the rebels. Labienus, the guy from before, died on the battlefield. Caesar then went back to Rome in June 45 BC and celebrated beating their own people. He then started planning out who was next to receive his wrath and violence. That just happened to be the Parthians, mainly to avenge the rich bastard Crassus after he got at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. He then got tied up in Dacia for a few years planning this war against the Parthians around March 18th, 44 BC. Meanwhile, back in Rome, at the Senate, there were attempts to establish Caesar as Rex, or king, which to the people was a title associated with oppression. So 2 tribunes said no to that, and the crowd supported them. So Caesar did the Chadliest thing possible, and kicked them out of office, and said, what are you gonna do about it? So this pissed a lot of people off, and around February 15th, 44 BC, he assumed dictatorship for life. And that really pissed a lot of people off. So there was a celebration called Lupercalia, which is some dumb hippie festival about purifying the city, or some mumbo-jumbo like that. And during the celebration, Mark Antony offered Caesar a diadem, or crown, and Caesar publicly told him to fuck off, essentially. Which, just the idea of that scene, I find hilarious. So by February 44 BC, Caesar had a lot of people that wanted to kick his ass. At least 60 of them. All conspirators, ranging from Pompeian ass-kissers to even fellow Caesarians. Everyone had kind of enough of his shit by this point, between his debt policies to slaughtering protesters, protesting for debt, funny enough, his rigged elections, to kicking out politicians from their positions. So news had leaked out about the conspiracy, and Caesar, being a Chad, refused any precautions and said to hell with bodyguards, and threw all caution to the wind. So the conspirators planned to kill Caesar on March 15th, or the Ides of March, only days before Caesar left to go start more wars with the Parthians. So disguising their assassination as a Senate meeting, the conspirators made sure they were the only ones armed at the meeting. Okay, so despite all warnings and red flags, Caesar went to this meeting, even despite being warned about the potential plot because, remember, this video is about Chads, and Chads aren't scared of nerds in dresses armed with steak knives. So while he was at the foot of the statue of Pompey, which is odd, because I thought he hated that guy, the conspirators attacked him. Now it's debated whether he was silent or whether he actually said, "You too, child," once he saw Brutus. Well, Caesar was stabbed anywhere between 23 to 35 times, and needless to say, he didn't survive, and the would-be dictator was dead. It is also believed he had a tapeworm, which is believed to be the cause of his seizures. Or, they were. They're not now, because, he's dead. Well, anyway, everyone, that's been another episode of Chads in History. If you guys enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, and show me some love in the comments. That's been Bandana Man speaking. Later, peeps. Be easy.